foster innovation, and promote sustainable industries that create jobs and prosperity. So let's review about SDG 9.
So let's talk about one of the world's biggest development goals, but let's do it through the story of just one country, Pakistan. And it's a fascinating story, really. It's a tale of incredible success happening right next to some pretty profound failure. And what it shows us is something absolutely crucial about what it really takes to build a modern economy. Let's get into it.
The goal we're digging into is called Sustainable Development Goal 9, or SDG 9 for short. The easiest way to think about it is as the world's shared blueprint for creating the economic backbone of a country. It's all about building for the future, you know?
Okay, so SDG 9 basically boils down to three main pillars. And to make it super simple, let's think of it like building a computer. First, you need infrastructure. The roads, the ports, the power grid, that's your hardware. Then you need industry, the factories, the businesses that make stuff. That's your engine. And finally, you need innovation, the new ideas, the R&D, the technology. That's your software. Now, here's the catch. Get any one of them wrong and the whole system, well, it just doesn't work.
All right, let's dive into Pakistan's story, and we're going to start with the really good news. Because when it comes to building the hardware, the country has had some absolutely massive successes. So what was the main driver behind all this progress? Well, it's a project you may have heard of, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC. We're talking about the single largest development policy in the country's entire history, and it has completely transformed Pakistan's physical infrastructure.
The impact was immediate, and it was huge. Over 5,200 megawatts of new power were pumped into the grid. Now, to you and me, that might just sound like a big number, but it was a total game changer. It helped finally put an end to the crippling energy blackouts that had plagued the country for years.
And it wasn't just about power, it was also about connection. Over 500 kilometers of brand new, modern highways, like the M5 motorway, were built. These roads are now linking major cities and economic centers, making it easier to move goods and people across the nation.
And you know, this hardware story isn't just about concrete and steel. At the same time, Pakistan was experiencing a digital revolution, building out that crucial information infrastructure that every country needs in the 21st century. The result of that? An absolute explosion in connectivity. Get this, Pakistan today has over 127 million broadband subscribers. That is, wow, that's more than half the entire country with access to the internet. And the sheer reach is pretty staggering. 3G and 4G mobile networks now cover 78% of the population. This kind of digital access creates a really powerful foundation for the future. It's a definite, clear win for the country. So, okay, let's pause for a second. You look at all this progress, new roads, reliable power, widespread internet, and you might be thinking, great, mission accomplished, right? But here's the question. Is having the best hardware really enough to win the game? And this, right here, is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because while the hardware is truly impressive, that second pillar, the industrial engine that's supposed to run on all that new hardware, it's pretty much stalled. See, the big promise was that all this new infrastructure would kickstart a huge industrial boom. The idea was that special economic zones would pop up everywhere, creating jobs and making new products. But the reality? Well, the source material says that progress has been slow and is largely unrealized. Ouch. The crucial point is that even with this massive hardware upgrade, the engine just isn't firing up. The manufacturing sector's share of the economy has basically flatlined. It means the country is still heavily reliant on things like textiles instead of moving into more advanced, higher-value industries.
And that brings us to the most critical failure of all, the final piece in our computer analogy. Because if the engine is stalled, it's often because it's running on outdated or, well, non-existent software. In this case, that software is innovation. This one number says it all. Pakistan spends just 0.16% of its GDP on research and development. That's the fuel for new ideas, for new technologies, for innovation itself. And to put that tiny number into perspective, just look at this chart. It is way, way below the world average of 0.43%, and it's less than a quarter of what its neighbor, India, spends. You know, the really innovative economies? They spend between 2 and 4%. This isn't even in the same league. The impact of this is just profound.
When you underinvest like this, you are effectively starving your universities, your research centers, and your companies of the funds they desperately need to create new products and compete on the world stage. It really is like having a top-of-the-line supercomputer with no programs to run on it. So let's pull all these threads together. When you have this massive imbalance between the three pillars, the hardware, the engine, and the software, what does the final scorecard actually look like? Well, here's that two-sided story in a nutshell. Pakistan gets a big green check mark for building the physical hardware and the digital networks. Absolutely. But it gets a failing grade when it comes to firing up its industrial engine, and an even bigger one for developing the innovative software needed to power everything. And the key takeaway here is that this kind of unbalanced approach to development is just incredibly risky. Sure, building shiny new roads and power plants is important, but if you don't also invest in the industries and the big ideas that will actually use them, you risk serious long-term economic stagnation. Which leaves us with a final and pretty critical question. Pakistan's story is a powerful case study for the entire developing world, and it really forces us to ask, in the 21st century, can any nation truly build its way to a prosperous future with hardware alone?
Thanks for your time to learn, earn, and lead. This is Mohammad Zishan Awan, Advocate High Court. To join Vision 2047, please register with us and be part of the transformation.